New York's former lieutenant governor with a new op-ed today. Betsy McCoy with some strong opinions on how badly teachers' unions hurt our children by pushing to keep those schools closed. Here's what she wrote. State laws determine teachers' unions' power. Protecting your kids from the unions requires waging political warfare, state by state. The COVID lockdowns dealt a devastating blow, but schools were in crisis long before that. The good news is that in red and purple states, reformers are pushing to change that. Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, Republican of New York, member of that select subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic and Ways and Means Committee as well. Great to have you today. First of all, what Randy Weingarten needs to answer to first would be what from you?
Well, we want to know all the facts relating to these documents that we've been able to identify showing that there was clearly a collusion between the teachers union and the Biden administration to keep these schools shut down. Why did she push for what I believe would be political solutions as opposed to actually following the science as the administration has been telling us they were doing? This is just another example of how this administration chose to placate political allies instead of doing what was right for the people. They hurt businesses, they hurt schools, they hurt students. They did so much damage with their, by arbitrarily deciding to close institutions instead of actually following the science like they told us they were doing.
You know, it's more than just the immediate term, though. I don't know if you were able to watch or listen to our reporter's report just then, Lydia Hugh, but I mean, our children, those who missed out on learning, and that would be the whole country, are going to miss out on earnings to the tune of 5.6%. I mean, maybe that doesn't sound like a lot for really, really rich people, but that's across their lifespan.
Yeah, and their families were really hurt too. They had financial losses as well when their children were not going to school and they were forced to stay home. But some children even committed suicide. They became so depressed by being at home and not having that social interaction that they need in schools. And here in New York City, which by the way, Randy was the president of our local union here in New York City, we were probably hurt the most. We saw schools shut down for a year and a half, all while private schools in New York City were open and they were doing it safely. And then on top of it, they had lobbied for a tremendous amount of money that is yet to be, it was never spent. It was never actually used for the purpose that it was supposed to, which was to reopen our schools. So we beg the question why, after donating so much money to the Democrats, to President Biden, were they so influential in drafting CDC guidelines that put our children in peril?
Yeah, and I want to know, as a citizen, where did that money go that they were supposed to spend on the schools here in New York? I live next door in New Jersey, but it's a valid question all over the country.
We're going to claw it back.
Yeah. In a testy new interview, Dr. Fauci refuses to take responsibility for anything that he might have done to further those lockdowns. He defiantly says, show me a school that I shut down and show me a factory that I shut down. Never. I never did. Then he doubled down in an interview just a couple of hours ago. Watch.
There was a personification of me as a person who essentially closed everything down. Those were public health recommendations that came from the CDC, and I have always been very supportive of the CDC because they base their recommendations purely on public health issues. And the point that I made, that as public health officials, it's our responsibility to give the public health perspective to it.
You know, this is a man who didn't even in the beginning wasn't even able to tell us that cloth masks absolutely don't do anything, which is why they don't wear them in the ER, by the way, cloth. Yet he said, put on whatever you could.
Yeah, there was a lot of damage that the statements made by the administration to the public caused. Many of our businesses are still struggling today as they were during the height of COVID. They just simply never recovered. I know two in my district that are close friends of mine that they've had to close the doors of their restaurants. We see the damage done to the students. As we mentioned, test scores just are not where they were. And in fact, the state of New York is looking to reducing the qualifications for these tests just just to get the kids to get by, because they're not meeting the standards for reading and math. They are way under where they should be. So they had real life ramifications for people each and every day, and we still see the effects of it. That's why Dr. Fauci and the others, they need to be held accountable, because they gave bad information, and also, quite frankly, they lied to the public. They said there was no NIH funding going to the Wuhan lab. We find out now there is, and not just NIH funding, but funding from the Department of Defense and Department of the State and USAID as well, as was testified at our last meeting. So there needs to be accountability, and that's what we're pushing for, the facts to get us there.
Yeah. I read, though, and we talked about this yesterday, did she lawyer up?
Yeah, well, that's a good question as to why Randi Weingarten felt the need to hire a defense attorney to come with her to testify before Congress if she did nothing wrong. So that is an interesting, I'm sure that question will be coming up as well today.
Well, I had lawmakers yesterday tell me that was rare. Former Oversight Chairman Jason Chaffetz was with me, and he said, I've never seen it either.